Hello everybody. This is a last video about aldehydes and ketones in which I'm adding something that was not in my original videos, but it's about the last little section here, addition of alcohols and then hemiacetals and acetals. So you can see I skipped ahead here to section 4. And so you see addition reactions for the aldehydes or ketones was not in the previous video, but you can see we have in here something that is an aldehyde or ketone, and it is reacting with an alcohol in the presence of an acid. And when that happens, you get this kind of an intermediate product, which we call a hemiacetal right here. And there's three parts that you're going to want to look at for the hemiacetals. You have the carbon right there, which I've highlighted in green. You have the ether group, which I've highlighted in blue right here. We have the OR, and it says OR double prime. Again, the R prime, R double prime just indicates that they can be the same alkyl group or different alkyl groups. But either way, because you have a carbon bonded to an oxygen that's bonded to another carbon, you have an ether there. And then in red, you have the alcohol right there. And that comes from the original aldehyde or ketone. So you have that right there. And so that is a hemiacetal. Those can react further with acid or with another alcohol. So this could be a different alcohol, or it could be the same as the original. But either way, this can go on to a second step. Essentially, the acid, like right here, can be attacked by that alcohol. And what that would do is it would form sort of an intermediate or transition state where you'd have OH2, and that would make that positively charged. And then another alcohol could come in and attack it, which would kick that off. And then the result of all of that is you get the acetal, which I'll highlight in yellow. And so you can see for the acetal, you have let me change some colors here. I'm going to circle that in purple, the alcohol there. You have the purple alcohol corresponding to that OR group right there. The blue one right here. We still have the green right there. And if I want, I could put plus H2O representing this alcohol right there that was cleaved off of this carbon. And so that's the formation of hemiacetals and acetals, and both of those are very important types of structures because they exist in our bodies. Sugars tend to form hemiacetals or occasionally acetals. When we look at in the next chapter the structure of carbohydrates in their linear form, they'll be aldehydes or ketones. But when they exist in our bodies, they're actually going to cyclize into structures where an alcohol within the same structure of the same molecule will internally cyclize with the carbonyl here, forming a hemiacetal. Or it could also go on to an acetal if the conditions were right. So you can see an example here where we have this aldehyde, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 carbons, but if you look at it carefully, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 atoms that would combine together to form the 5-membered ring. So let me change the color of my pencil here, and I'll just number the carbons. You have 1, or not the carbons, I'll number the atoms. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that structure, and then over here in the cyclized form, you can see this is actually going to be 5. That's from the alcohol. Carbon 1, the aldehyde 1, is actually going to be right here. So that makes this 2, 3, and 4. And if you look carefully at this, you can see there's a propyl group right here, which would be these 3 carbons right there. So I'll highlight that right there, which would be these carbons, and well, okay, there we go. Let me fix that. There we go. And then I'll just highlight in black the aldehyde oxygen right there. So that's how you can get structures like that with this oxygen inside of a ring. It's called a heterocyclic structure because you have an oxygen in there, and it's not all carbons inside the ring. So now we get to tautomerization and enols. Tautomerization is a process in which you have structural isomers of each other readily interconverting between themselves, one of which will be a ketone and the second of which will be an enol. The enol is a compound, the name is kind of self-explanatory if you really look at it carefully. It has an ene in it and an alcohol, so it's an enol. So you have, ooh, that's not a good color. So an enol would be something like this, and the rest of the structure doesn't really matter, but you have the alkene and you have the alcohol, so it's an enol. And those can readily interconvert between that, and I guess in this case it would be an aldehyde right here. So enol, not ketone, aldehyde, and the process here we call tautomerization. So I have some formal definitions for you here. Tautomerization, that is a process in which structural isomers readily interconvert by relocating a hydrogen atom. So you could see between the enol and the aldehyde here, this hydrogen has gone from the oxygen to this carbon right here. Because if you look at the rest of the structure, we have 2 hydrogens on the alkene on the terminal end of it and 1 on the inside form of it. We still have the 2 here and the 1 over here. That was that. So the only thing that has changed is essentially the position of that red hydrogen, and so that's tautomerization. And then enols are just compounds that have an alcohol directly attached to an alkene. And as I mentioned, they readily interconvert between the aldehyde or ketone, depending on the structure. If it was that this hydrogen is replaced by an R group, doesn't matter what it is, could be a methyl group, ethyl group, something, then that makes this a ketone down there, not an aldehyde. And so you can see this enol ketone tautomerization process, and that's where the term keto-enol tautomers comes from right there. So both of these, this one and this one, are tautomers of each other. They interconvert through a process called tautomerization. Again, you can see an example here of tautomerization. They have some ketone, which I have written there as keto, but this is the tautomerization right there. Now you have a hydrogen here, which I had left out. That one is the hydrogen right there. So you have the R group, the R prime, the R double prime. Those are still present. Carbon-carbon bonds are very, very difficult to break, so those are never gonna, you're not gonna see that for this process. But the carbon-carbon double bond right here and the carbon-oxygen double bond, those are not hard to break, as I've mentioned many times before. So those can break and move around. The carbon-hydrogen bonds are weaker than carbon-carbon bonds, and so that hydrogen can freely move around. And you get the ketone and enol forms. Here's an example of a sugar, in this case D-glucose. This is this open chain or straight chain form, and you can see it eventually forms two different closed chain or cyclic forms. You have what's called alpha D-glucose on top there, and you have beta D-glucose in the bottom. Now in each case you're going to have a carbon, which is labeled carbon 1 right there, bonded to an OR group, which I'll just highlight in green, OR, and an alcohol, which I'm going to highlight in yellow. So you have right there and right there. You can see that they're on opposite sides in these, and that's why you get the alpha or the beta terms. We should see that in the next chapter, but in either case, the gray carbon, the one that has been grayed, I'll put that back, there we go. That one is a hemiacetal because it is bonded to an ether, which is the green portion, and an alcohol, so it's a hemiacetal. And that concludes Chapter 14, Aldehydes and Ketones.